Your brain is going to age, that part is not negotiable. But whether it deteriorates, whether the memories dissolve, whether the person inside stops recognizing the people they love, that part might be. Because somewhere in the world, there are people who grew up eating different food, sleeping differently, living differently, and their brains, scanned and tested by researchers who flew in specifically to find the flaw in the data, look nothing like yours. The island is called Ikaria. It sits in the eastern Aegean Sea, about 35 miles off the coast of Turkey. It has no major airport. The roads are narrow and steep. The population is around 8,000 people, and for most of its history, the rest of the world had no particular reason to pay attention to it. That changed in 2008 when a researcher named Dan Buettner, working with National Geographic, identified 5 places on Earth where people were living significantly longer than anywhere else. He called them blue zones. Ikaria was one of them. People there were reaching 90 at 2.5 times the rate of Americans. They had significantly lower rates of heart disease, significantly lower rates of depression, and something that the researchers kept noting in their reports, almost as an aside, almost as if they weren't sure what to do with it, nearly no Alzheimer's disease, not low rates, nearly none. In the United States, roughly 1 in 3 people over the age of 85 has Alzheimer's. In Ikaria, that number was closer to 1 in 100. Researchers who first encountered these figures assumed there was a problem with the data, the sample was too small, the records were incomplete, the diagnostic criteria were different, they kept looking for the error, and the error kept not being there, so they started asking a different question, not what was wrong with the data, but what was different about the island. The first thing researchers noticed was the diet. Icarians eat what is broadly called a Mediterranean diet, but that phrase has been so diluted by supplement marketing and restaurant menus that it has almost lost its meaning. What Icarians actually eat is something more specific. Wild greens foraged from the hillsides, over 150 varieties, many of which contain compounds that no laboratory has fully cataloged yet. Legumes at almost every meal, olive oil in quantities that would seem excessive anywhere else, very little sugar, almost no processed food, and goat's milk, with a fat profile measurably different from cow's milk, and compounds researchers now link directly to protective effects on the aging brain. But diet alone didn't explain it. Plenty of populations eat Mediterranean-style diets. None of them have numbers like Icaria's. The second thing researchers noticed was the sleep. Icarians nap, not occasionally, not on weekends, daily. A 30-minute rest in the early afternoon is built into the rhythm of the day the way meals are. A 2007 study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine followed over 23,000 Greek adults for 6 years. Regular nappers had a 37% lower risk of dying from heart disease. The researchers noted that the effect was strongest in working men, a group under chronic stress, which suggested the nap was doing something more than just resting the body. It was interrupting the cortisol cycle. It was giving the brain a window of recovery that most modern schedules have engineered out of existence. But sleep didn't fully explain it either. The third thing researchers noticed was harder to measure. Icarians don't experience time the way most of the developed world does. This is not a romantic observation. It is a documented behavioral pattern. The island runs on a schedule that is, by any external standard, chaotic. Shops open late and close whenever. Social visits are unannounced and long. Meals stretch for hours. No one is in a hurry, not because life is easy, but because the culture has never organized itself around the assumption that speed is a virtue. Researchers studying chronic stress and neurodegeneration have found that sustained elevated cortisol, the hormone your body releases under stress, is directly toxic to the hippocampus. That's the region responsible for forming and retrieving memories. The same structure Alzheimer's disease attacks first. Chronic stress doesn't just make you feel bad. Over years and decades, it physically shrinks the part of your brain that makes you you. Icarians, by the measures researchers could capture, carried significantly lower chronic stress loads than comparable Western populations. Not because their lives were without hardship. The island is poor by European standards. The economy is fragile. But hardship and chronic stress are not the same thing. Hardship can be absorbed. Chronic stress, the low-grade, unrelenting pressure of modern schedules and modern expectations, cannot. And the brain keeps a record of the difference, but stress was only one part of what the researchers were seeing. The other part was harder to put into a chart. Social scientists who spent extended time on Ikaria kept noting the same thing in their field reports. Older people on the island are not separate. They are not managed. They are not placed somewhere comfortable and visited on holidays. They are inside the life of the community every single day. They sit at the table during meals. They are consulted in decisions. They are present at celebrations and arguments and ordinary Tuesday evenings that nobody will remember, but everyone will feel. In most of the developed world, aging is a process of progressive social subtraction. You retire, your circle contracts, your role in the daily life of other people diminishes. The research on what this does to the brain is not subtle. Social isolation increases the risk of dementia by approximately 50%. Not because loneliness feels bad, because the brain, deprived of the stimulation of meaningful social engagement, begins to slow its own maintenance. The connections between neurons that go unused start to thin. The brain that is not being needed starts, in a measurable, biological sense, to let itself go. On Ikaria, the oldest people in the community are still needed. They know things, they are asked things, they show up to things, and their brains apparently respond accordingly. There is one more piece, and it might be the strangest one. Researchers studying Icarian longevity noticed that the island has an unusually high rate of religious practice, specifically Greek Orthodox fasting. Throughout the year, the Orthodox calendar prescribes roughly 150 days of fasting, periods during which meat, dairy, and oil are significantly restricted. Researchers who initially dismissed this as a cultural footnote later reconsidered when they began looking at the emerging science of intermittent fasting and its effects on the aging brain. What they found was that periodic caloric restriction triggers a cellular cleanup process called autophagy. The brain, under mild metabolic stress, clearing out the damaged proteins and cellular debris that accumulate in Alzheimer's patients over decades. The fasting wasn't deprivation, it was maintenance. A reset the brain had been running on a schedule that a calendar enforced for 1,000 years. Nobody designed this. Nobody knew. The island was not trying to solve Alzheimer's. It was just living the way it had always lived, and its people's brains were arriving at old age in a condition that the rest of the world spends billions of dollars and entire research careers trying to engineer. Now, here's the part of this story that is easy to miss if you move through it too quickly. None of what protects the Icarian brain is exotic. None of it requires a pharmaceutical breakthrough or a clinical trial or a subscription to anything. It requires eating food that was not manufactured. It requires sleeping in the afternoon. It requires not treating urgency as a personality trait. It requires remaining useful to the people around you for as long as you are alive. And it requires, occasionally, giving your body less than it wants so that it is forced to clean itself. These are not discoveries. They are recoveries. Things the human body already knew how to do before the modern world decided that efficiency was more important than almost everything else. The researchers who went to Ikaria looking for an error in the data found something they hadn't prepared for. They found that the absence of Alzheimer's was not a mystery with a hidden answer. It was the predictable result of a life the brain was designed to live. The mystery was not why these people were spared. The mystery was why the rest of us assumed that what we built instead would be fine. Your brain is going to age. That part remains true. But the research coming out of a small, unhurried island in the Aegean suggests that what happens after that is not as fixed as we've been told. The people who lived there didn't discover anything. They just never stopped doing what the human brain had always needed them to do. Stay connected, slow down, rest, be useful, and give the body, every so often, the chance to remember how to take care of itself. They weren't trying to solve anything, they were just living. And somehow, that turned out to be enough.